Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look past all the usual headlines about hackers and dig into the real, often invisible, reasons why major security breaches keep happening. And you'll see that the biggest vulnerabilities, well, they aren't always in the code. They're in our own minds, our companies, and even our economic systems. So let's dive in.
You know, these words from U.S. congressional leaders, they signal a massive shift in how we think about this stuff. This is not just about protecting a company's database anymore. This is about national security. The whole game has leveled up, way beyond simple firewalls and software patches. We're talking about a threat to the entire country.
And yeah, that brings us to the big question we're going to explore today. If we know the problem has gotten this big, why are we still throwing the same old tools at it? It feels like we keep looking for bad guys trying to break down the door when all the evidence suggests the most dangerous threats are often already inside. So let's start by zooming all the way into the micro level, the human mind. See, the most damaging security breaches often come from people who already have the keys. They have authorized access. They aren't breaking in. They're already part of the system. And what drives them is way more complex than any simple computer bug. And when they do act, it is incredibly expensive. We're talking an average of over $11 million for a single breach. So why is that number so high? Well, it's because our traditional security systems are all built to stop attacks from the outside. They are just not designed to spot the subtle, psychological red flags of a threat that's growing on the inside. They're basically looking for the wrong thing entirely.
So what should we be looking for? There's this fascinating field called forensic cyberpsychology. It literally studies the minds of cybercriminals, and it's identified 4 key warning signs. These are behaviors that can actually predict a future threat. Things like a constant need for online approval, all the way to darker personality traits like narcissism and a complete lack of empathy.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the data. This chart pulls together 65 different studies, and it shows just how predictive these things are. Those dark triad traits, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, they have a 74% correlation. But check out algorithmic reinforcement. That's when our social media feeds and other platforms just keep feeding our biases and rewarding extreme behavior. It has a stunning 89% correlation with insider threats. That means our digital world can actually amplify these dangerous tendencies.
And this chart really drives the point home, showing how these factors stack up in the research. Algorithmic reinforcement and those dark triad traits are the real heavy hitters here, making up over 60% of the observed risks. So what does that tell us? It's rarely just one thing. It's usually a dangerous cocktail of psychological vulnerabilities that builds and builds over time.
Right, and the crucial point here is that this doesn't just happen overnight, it's a pathway. It often kicks off with something that seems pretty harmless, like a need for digital validation, getting likes. But that can morph into real identity confusion. And that confusion creates an opening for these darker personality traits to really take root, which can eventually lead to someone becoming a threat in the workplace.
Okay, so now let's zoom out a bit to the organizational level. Because those individual vulnerabilities we just talked about, they become absolutely catastrophic when the system itself is fragile and packed with its own hidden problems.
And this kind of organizational fragility actually has a name. It's called technical debt. And no, it's not just about old code or a few software bugs. It's the conscious choice to take shortcuts to push problems into the future. Things like skipping security reviews or not documenting your work, all to get something out the door faster today. And it works exactly like financial debt. You get a short-term win, right? Maybe you launch a product faster, but you are absolutely stuck paying a much, much higher price down the road. And that payment comes in the form of security risks, fragile systems, and massive costs to clean it all up. It's a loan that always comes due.
This analogy is just perfect. It completely captures the danger. Think about it. Every shortcut, every skipped security review is like using a dirty dish. 1 or 2 might not hurt, but they accumulate until the whole system becomes toxic. And eventually, you get the food poisoning of a major data breach.
So let's zoom out one more time, to the macro level. Why on earth do so many smart organizations pile up all this dangerous debt and ignore the human risk factors? Well, the answer, as it so often is, comes down to economics.
Okay, first, a quick but important concept. For decades, cybersecurity experts have used this model called the CIA triad. It's all about keeping data private, or confidentiality, making sure it's accurate, that's integrity, and ensuring you can get to it, which is availability. This has been the classic way to think about security.
But this classic insight from researchers, Anderson and Moore, just turns that on its head. They argue that the root cause of our failures isn't just bad tech that fails the CIA triad. It's bad economic incentives that lead us to make terrible security decisions in the first place.
And here is the fundamental conflict. You've got private companies that have to make decisions based on profit and loss, right? But at the same time, they are running the critical infrastructure that's on the front lines of attacks from entire nation-states. So expecting them to make these huge national defense-level security investments that just don't make business sense, well, it's a recipe for failure. There's this massive gap between what's good for the bottom line and what's necessary for national security.
So if the problem is human, and it's organizational, and it's economic, then a purely technical solution is never, ever going to work. We need a totally new model for defense, one that actually addresses all three layers of this problem.
And what that means is shifting our entire approach to security from being reactive, cleaning up the mess after a breach, to being predictive. It's all about focusing on behavioral intelligence, so we can see the warning signs long before an incident ever happens.
Now, one proposed solution is a framework called the Behavioral Risk Intelligence Model, or BRIM for short. And the whole idea here is to combine what we know about human psychology with the power of machine learning. It's designed to look for those early warning signs in people's behavior, to understand the why behind a potential threat, and then use AI to spot subtle patterns, all while operating under strict ethical rules, of course. So here's how something like that could work. An AI-driven system analyzes non-invasive digital behaviors. We're talking things like the tone of communications or maybe unusual login patterns to spot those psychological red flags we talked about earlier. And the goal is to create a risk dashboard that gives organizations the foresight they need to step in and offer support long before a crisis ever happens. It's about prevention, not just reaction.
But look, technology by itself is never enough. To really solve this thing, we need policies that get to the root of those bad economic incentives. And that means a few things. Government needs to streamline its own confusing regulations. We need to create real financial reasons for companies to prioritize national-level security. And we have to build a collective defense model to handle those massive systemic threats, like the SolarWinds attack. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. For decades, we have been building these huge digital walls to keep hackers out. But maybe the real battle for cybersecurity isn't fought on the network at all. Maybe it's fought in our own psychology, in our company cultures, and ultimately, in our economic models.